evening, ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome to the Alicorn Leadership Summit 2021-22. I'm Rochelle De Souza, the Managing Director at Lighthouse Funds. We launched the Alicorn Summit same time last year to celebrate gender diversity and convene thought leadership. This year, the theme is Women Leaders Gen 2.0. Before we move ahead, I want to take a moment to thank PwC, who has been our sponsor for this year's summit that ran across 3 events between December 2021 and today. Over the past few months, WinPE has undertaken a massive survey along with BCG to gather data across PEVC funds to set a baseline of where we are as an industry and what we need to do to get to that end goal. We will be launching that report today. But before we get to that, we have a short video for you. I have with me Nupur Garg, founder of WinPE. Nupur, as I mentioned, we will be launching the report today. What are your expectations from the report?
Hi, Rochelle, and good evening, good morning, good afternoon to everyone. I am really excited about the report. From the very beginning, from the time that WinPE was launched, I was clear that we need to identify where we stand outside of anecdotal data and set a baseline from where we can build upwards and measure progress. While we have been seeing global data in recent years, we either tend to feel that we are better off or that we are worse off, depending on what our individual experiences may have been. And that changes with this report. And at WinPE, currently we are at a stage where our members, encouraged with the progress that they have collectively made in the last 2 years, are keen to set long-term targets on both representation and outcomes. And this report, I believe, provides a strong foundation to base these targets on. And, very importantly, this report has given us research-based insights on what kind of practices and interventions are actually considered effective by women. That will allow all of us to focus and prioritize our efforts so as to make greatest progress in the shortest period of time. And I'm delighted that we have BCG as our partners in this effort. We have been able to benefit from their deep understanding of the private investments industry and their cross-sectoral view on gender diversity. Super excited and looking forward to the unveiling.
I echo your excitement, Nupur. I'm actually wearing 2 hats today, right? One is as a part of the leadership of the firm and also as a woman investor. And what I'm expecting today to see are probably tools and insights that resonate a lot with women so that we can attract talent and retain these women in the firms. I also recollect being a part of the WinPE Collegium as a part of that leadership. We've always had debates about what goals we individually as firms we need to take and what goals as an industry we need to take. I think the report today will serve as a guidepost for us to help set those goals, right? So without further ado, the team at BCG has worked tirelessly gathering all of the insights, all of the data, and there was a massive survey that was conducted, right? So I welcome Kanchan Samtani, Managing Director and Senior Partner at Boston Consulting Group, and her colleague, Roshni Rathi, Partner at BCG. Thank you, BCG, and over to you.
Thank you so much, and really welcome the opportunity to be with all of you here today, and for the unveiling, as Nupur and Rochelle called it. The private equity and venture capital industry are becoming an increasingly significant part of economic activity across the world, and increasingly in Asia Pacific as well, with very large global funds deploying more and more capital, and really looking at Asia as one of the regions that will deliver strong growth over the next few years. Yet, female representation, as we've seen in this part of the world, continues to be amongst the lower levels. To understand how diversification efforts are progressing in India, but also other parts of Asia, we fielded 2 surveys in the last quarter. The first comprised of 36 PEVC firms, of which 29 were from India and the others from the rest of Southeast Asia. The second one actually covered 80 individual women from the industry in both India and other parts of Asia who talked about their individual reflections and personal experiences of working in the private equity and venture capital industry. In addition to this, we also conducted interviews with 20 plus PEVC executives, including women across levels from associates to managing partners and heads of funds, but also several men in leadership roles to understand their perspective on this topic. The research and the feedback from all the interviews, as you will see, actually indicates some very clear signs of progress. I think the importance and visibility of this topic has certainly been enhanced across the board, and this has resulted in some meaningful gains in the last few years, where the representation of women in PEVC funds has actually grown from about 15-16% in 2018 to 25% just 3 years later in 2021. And this has been true across transaction and portfolio management teams. In addition to this, I think the sentiment is really positive, and that I think has been one of the bigger wins. The sentiment actually indicates that 90% of the 80 women that we surveyed feel safe in voicing their opinion at work. Most of them feel that they are heard and really valued for their contributions in the workplace, and that's really good to see as a baseline as well. But as you can see from the data, there is ground to cover. And particularly, we have ground to cover and gaps at the mid to senior level roles in private equity and venture capital. If you look at the numbers on the screen in front of you, at the entry level, we have a very healthy, nearly 40% ratio. With this ratio, the PEVC industry actually mirrors the recruiting pools, does better than some other sectors, as well as does well when you compare to the alternative options where this talent can go to. However, it starts to narrow down, and it narrows down to about 20% at the mid-level and 15% at the senior levels. And more importantly, the leadership representation, at least in the last couple of years, has not moved meaningfully. Hence, these are some core issues for us to discuss today and going forward. Looking ahead, in order to ensure that we continue to maintain this momentum and continue to improve the diversity, firms need to think about how to retain and hire into mid to senior level roles, and that's really going to be key. Through this report and the work that we are sharing today, we've tried to offer some data that lays out these issues and what some of the challenges are in a more nuanced way. And we try to offer some practical suggestions, which we'll discuss over the course of this discussion today.
So as we conducted this research, there were broadly 4 areas that we studied in terms of areas where firms actually put into place initiatives to improve gender diversity. The 4 areas to think about are culture, recruitment, advancement, and leadership. Across each of these 4 areas, what we looked at is a number of representative indicators via a survey, and we also supplemented our understanding through the extensive interviews that Kanchan mentioned. What you find, and I'll actually take us through each of these buckets one by one, what you find is essentially, if you think about culture as an amalgamation of the policies that are put in place, day-to-day interactions and behaviors that are role modeled by senior leaders in a firm, what you see is that a number of representative policies are actually in place at many firms. So for example, multiple firms actually have flexible work hours and locations, as well as maternity and paternity benefits that are relatively equal, both of which are actually positive for women. Most firms, very few number of firms actually do an analysis of gender pay gaps, but that's likely because it's difficult to do mass data analysis at this point. What you do see, though, is even though a number of policies are in place, and they're in place quite widely, women are sometimes hesitant to take advantage of these policies, also because they haven't really seen yet some of the senior leadership in these firms take advantage of these policies, whether it's men or women in the firm. They almost feel that there is a potential that they might be perceived as less ambitious if they try to take advantage of these policies. And so it's really important for funds to make sure that there are role models visible and there's almost a normalization of some of these policies and approaches across the entire employee base, as opposed to just focused on women. When you look at recruitment, what you see is, and I think Kanchan referred to this, what you see is that at the beginning, which is at entry-level roles, the percentage of women in the roles really mirrors the talent pools that firms are recruiting from, where we now have almost 30 to 40% of associates coming in, of the associate class coming in, that is women. That's been a pretty, hard-fought battle in a sense, where firms have made sincere efforts to actually expand the top of the funnel, make sure that they're interviewing enough high potential women, to make sure that they're able to continue to be selective and at the same time bring in sufficient women into their entry level pools. One of the questions that came up as we were talking to women through our interviews was this whole question about fewer women in the industry is perhaps almost a self-perpetuating problem, where women may tend to question whether they can be successful in the industry if they don't see enough role models. And many firms were actually, making sure that they had visible role models through recruiting processes, and were supporting and coaching women through recruiting processes to make sure that, they felt like they could have a long-term successful career at the firm. What you do see is also that, at senior levels, since promotion is takes time, gains have been slightly slower at mid to senior levels. There is lateral hiring that happens at these levels, but primarily within the industry, not yet from outside the industry. So net, the total number of women or proportion of women at mid to senior levels hasn't risen significantly. If we think about advancement and some of the challenges and questions that came up during advancement, what we found was, about over 25% of funds cited, a life event such as maternity as a reason for a woman leaving the organization. Almost an equal proportion of funds cited that, culture and work hours were a reason for women to leave the organization. And also, if you count for education, the attrition at mid-levels was actually higher than lower levels or entry levels, which indicates a real talent loss for the firms. Two things, seem to really matter here if you think about what's really important and what women are saying is important. The first is actually making sure that there are, gender-neutral evaluation processes. And what this means is, transparent processes and policies to be clear about what it takes to actually get to the next level. And also some clarity around, if a woman or any individual in a firm was to take advantage of some of the flex policies or, some of the geographic movements or any other, flexibilities within the firm, how would that actually impact their advancement? Some clarity around that is actually helpful, both, of course, for women, but also across all employees. The second thing that came out is very, very important was active talent management for high potential women. I think in an industry that is so apprenticeship based and where mentors are really important, the idea of senior men and women both, mentoring as well as really sponsoring women in the organization as they advance through their career was a really important idea. And, the other thing is to make sure that, that mentorship is very tailored and, folks don't assume what a woman might need, but actually, are tailoring their responses and, guidance to specific stages. I think the last point to make here in terms of the last bucket is just in terms of leadership. So what we did find is that, there were a certain number of funds that were, looking to improve the number of women in leadership, but a relatively small proportion that were able to actually do this as a serious focus. But things like, increased visibility and exposure to female leaders and role models, as well as, a better representation of women in senior roles, both came out as really important things for improving gender diversity. Other areas like, improving reporting of diversity metrics, KPIs, making sure that there's a strategy and action plan, important and necessary, but not sufficient. The primary, point that came out through the survey as well as through the interviews was, given that, there is a small proportion of women right now at the top, of course, those women, do need to actually help coach and encourage and, bring younger women up the ranks as well. But given that, proportion is relatively small, it's quite important as well for men within organizations to champion gender diversity within the organization. So as you think about, these are the 4 buckets of areas where I think a lot of progress has been made. There's still some ways to go, but a bit more of a concrete understanding of what some of the challenges are and what's working and what women value. What we've laid out is essentially a 7-point framework for funds to think about as they start, or perhaps continue down the path of improving gender diversity. The first of this, of course, is to just focus on the top of the funnel and make sure that at the, in the typical recruiting cycles at the entry level, you're interviewing sufficient women. Many different ways to do this. I think some funds have asked headhunters to make sure that specifically the proportion of women in the interview slate is similar to the proportion of women at the target colleges where they're recruiting. Other firms have, reached out to women-specific organizations to make sure that they're bringing in enough resumes and interviewing enough women. The second point here is to actually think about more creative ways to bring in mid to senior level talent. The proportion of women or the number of women at the mid to senior level in India today who have direct investing experience may be a small number. And what that means then is that funds probably need to tap into adjacent talent pools, whether it's corporate development, banking, consulting, to actually see whether there are, to actually seek out high potential women in those industries and bring them in and coach them and help them grow. The third is actually thinking about, while most funds have policies in place, really building a culture that, makes it okay and normalizes it and makes, creates role models that are actually availing of all of these policies and makes them more a part of business as usual across all employees, not just women employees. The fourth is to make sure that, performance evaluation criteria are clear, transparent, gender neutral to the extent possible. The fifth is to make sure that there is access to mentors and female role models. Given the small number of women at firms, there are creative ways that some firms have taken. So, for example, there are firms that have cross-geography communities, cross-geography mentorship. And of course, while mentorship is important, making sure that, high potential women are also getting sponsored and coached through advancement is quite important. The next one is to make sure that men are more actively involved, especially senior men who are, championing the gender diversity agenda. And, making sure that, policies, procedures, et cetera, are in place, as well as, in their day-to-day, just that they are, being supportive and also providing mentorship and sponsorship to high potential women. The last one of this is to follow up, is to actually make sure that this is, women's gender diversity is a priority in terms of the senior agenda and also a part of the KPIs and KRAs that are tracked at the senior level.
Thanks, Roshni, and thanks, Kanchan, for those very interesting insights and also about the 7-point framework, right, in terms of what could be some of the tools and practices that firms could adopt. Very interesting. I think as a part of WinPE, all of the firms have been thinking about correcting the entry funnel, making sure that policies are pretty much business as usual. But there is a lot to celebrate, but there is a lot to do as well. But thank you for bringing those insights onto the table and making it concrete. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rochelle.
Nupur, just to double click on some of these things, right? What I found extremely interesting is if you look at the women pool as it stands today, right? There are 60% of those women who reside today in the analyst and the associate bucket. And you probably have only 20% your principal and the partner bucket. Now, if I sort of draw the same analogy to the male section, the split between the analysts and the principals and the partners is pretty much even. Now that's where we need to get to, right? So as the universe of women become larger within the investing ecosystem, what we need to make sure is that the movement into the senior buckets is far more seamless, so that it becomes meaningful. There is more agency and there's more decision making at these roles.
I completely agree, Rochelle. And in fact, if you look at the data for men in investing, the percentage actually peaks at the partner level. So amongst all male investors, a third are partners. And this is an imbalance of power. And it reminds me of a very interesting article from the MIT Sloan Management Review that talks about the three layers of progress for women. The first is breaking in, the second is the critical mass phase. And finally comes the stage of influence where real power resides. And I think we are at the breaking in phase right now. Rochelle, you're
I
on
was on
mute.
mute. I always make this mistake, but again, just sort of repeating. I find that breaking in phase term to be very very interesting, and in fact, what BCG pointed out, there is data to support that. So if you look at incremental hires that have happened over the last 3 years, right? What's very encouraging is that 60% of those incremental hires have been women in the associate and the analyst count. So we're doing something exactly right to correct the entry funnel. But when we move on to the principal and the partner levels again, I sound like a broken record, but there the incremental hires have been far and few. And I think that's where we need to uh, adopt better policies of maybe lateral hire, so on and so forth, so we get to the critical mass and the stage of influence, like you mentioned.
So, I think this is literally the elephant in the room. This challenge of increasing representation of women in leadership and decision making roles. It is a critical component of building gender balance. Now, one could say we have increased the entry funnel, and hopefully, in the next 8 to 10 years, we will start to see changes at the top. But unfortunately, it is more complex than that, and historical data has shown us so, right? So it needs strong talent management coupled with lateral hiring if we need to fix that anomaly in the shorter term. So now, investing by most is considered to be an apprenticeship business, and there are many references to this fact, and firms prefer to grow talent from within. But you know what? I was a lateral hire, and one of our most experienced investors and a WinPE advisor, Renuka Ramnath, was not an investor from day one either. So I think it is time to push the boundaries of conventional thinking and tap into diversity of not only gender, but also professional backgrounds, experiences, skills, etc., that investing firms could benefit from as they build their teams.
I completely agree with you there, Nupur. And something else that stood out for me in the presentation today, one little pie chart, was if you look at the respondents or the number of firms that did the survey, 60% of the firms did not have any women at principal or at the partner level, which means, whatever representation of women that we have now in the industry is pretty much shouldered by the balance. Now that's an opportunity because firms are doing a lot to correct that. So those percentages probably will get to where we are with respect to the male universe if the balance 60% corrected. So there's a lot of opportunity there.
I agree. I agree. And, like you said, it means that while average numbers indicate progress, it is not taking place in a uniform manner across the industry. But, here is how I look at it. I think this report should be read as what it was really intended to be: baseline data, taking stock of where the industry stands so that we can build from here. It is not meant to be a judgment or a report card, from where we sort of start taking a stand or, criticizing people or criticizing the industry. Next, I would say that let's not fail to acknowledge the fact that these funds participated in the survey. The survey for fund managers was not anonymous, and it required pulling out and sharing data for over a period of 4 years. So the respondents were clearly people who take gender diversity seriously. When we have a challenge at such a massive scale as we do in gender diversity, every step counts. And I am grateful to all the men, women, and teams who took the time and made the effort to complete the surveys. Regardless of what those numbers are, the fact that they made the effort, I think, is a huge beginning for everybody.
Of course.
And, I will be remiss here if I did not acknowledge the IVCA and SVCA for sharing these surveys with their members. And of course, our panelists coming up who are here to discuss the report and its findings. I want to give a special shout out to our male allies, Kunal, Sunil, and VT, for putting themselves in the line of fire today. Thank you to all of you for being our champions.
I extend that shout out. And we have GPs from marquee funds who will be sharing their insights from the report. So, again, a special shout out to the male champions. We have with us Kunal Shroff, managing partner at Chris Capital. We have with us Sunil Mishra, partner, primary investments, Adam Street Partners, and VT Bharadwaj, co founder and general partner with A91 Partners. And I'm not forgetting the women champions, and we have with us Bala Deshpande, founder and partner, Mega Delta Capital, and we have Shweta Jalan, managing partner at Advent International. Welcome, folks, and over to you to discuss the report and the insights.
Thank you for being with us today. And I really look forward to a no holds barred discussion over the next 45 minutes around diversity challenge, but also what do you see as some of the solutions for the industry going forward. As we all saw from some of the data in the report, significant progress has been made, but there are, of course, gaps that remain. And I'd like to touch upon these with you, both from your vantage points as senior industry leaders, but also for some of you from your own personal experiences and learnings that you've had. Shweta, I'd like to start with you, if that's okay. As we went through the interviews and the discussions, many women that we spoke to mentioned that they sometimes struggle with the perception of being a diversity hire, especially in firms where the gender ratios are low. I'd like to just explore this thought with you here. How real do you think this issue is, first of all, and how do firms and leaders, as well as the women themselves, deal with it in your view?
Shweta's on mute.
Shweta, I think you're on mute.
Kanchana, I think you're on mute now.
I am so sorry. So I was saying, Bala, maybe we'll come to you first while Shweta is sorting out the tech issues. One of the other themes or perceptions that we heard was around investing being a bit of a macho business and executives in the business having maybe more aggressive personalities, harder hours, travel, etc. Hence the question sometimes on how suited is this for women and for longer term success of their careers. Just what's your view on this and how should one deal with this? Again, from both vantage points of being, a leader in the business as well as, being a woman who's done it yourself.
Sure. I think I would actually like to say that I don't think that many firms think that it's a macho business. I think there is, in fact, a lot of support that we have seen. I mean, I've been in this is my third firm in investing. And I don't think that issue really prevails among, I would say, definitely our peer group. I would say that it may exist in some kind of entrepreneur or companies or corporates which are slightly old world, and it may translate into you being questioned about whether you can handle an aggressive entrepreneur because you are not aggressive. So I think it's a very nebulous and a very amorphous kind of a perception that we have to sometimes deal with. But I would say this, right? I think my personal belief is that no function or role or in investing is actually gender based, right? It is a very finely tuned art of investing, to which you bring perspective, you bring your collective wisdom, and then you basically invest and make money. So I think the issue is not so much the perception of aggressiveness or late hours or any of those, but I think what I feel is a genuine issue is, are women really comfortable after entering a firm, being in the middle, coming up to the middle management, and then going up to the seniority level? What does it take to go from being a good management executive in an investing firm to becoming a general partner, or the becoming the leader? And that is what I think even the BCG report is reflecting it, in the terms of the drop off that happens at the middle at the middle management level. So my question, and partly my answer too, is that, is inclusion is the inclusion that is happening, and increasingly so, is it a mere demographic statistic to meet a stated corporate goal? Or is there a real behavioral, psychographical change that has happened among all people, including the women themselves, to make this a gender agnostic role? So I do not think that any of the favorite catechisms, right, that women have more empathy, women can multifunction, this is a macho role, this is aggressiveness, you have to be tough to deal with hardcore entrepreneurs. None of them matter. What really matters, according to me, is that, has the firm really included the woman employee, so to speak, in its true sense. So when I'm presenting a case in the IC, let's say, nobody's looking at me as Bala, a woman presenting, but Bala with, Deshpande, the investor that is presenting or propagating a case. So I think that is really the most important question that I think is not being answered, because we don't know whether all these women who have come into the industry are they really feeling included. But I would also say that the answer also lies in the woman herself. I think we have come to the stage after raising awareness about this issue, about frameworking solutions, about talking about gender sensitivity and training the men folk, as we say. All that is good, but I think the final onus lies on the women to say that yes, these perceptions exist, but I don't have to answer to them. I don't have to react to them, but I have to own and live my truth. That is, I'm an investor and I'm here to deliver returns for my investors. So I think that is really where I would say that I would urge the women to start shifting, because these perceptions will surface somewhere, right? They'll surface in a board meeting where you feel you've been talked down to, or there is, you have not been you do not make it to the list of potential partners, you are not even considered for it. So they creep up somewhere, but somewhere you have to take a call saying that it doesn't matter, I'm still going to make it in this space in my own way. I think we're reaching that stage now.
Yeah, yeah. And, I'm really glad to hear you say that, Bala. There's always this, this thought process around what women are good at and what men are good at. And, after 20 plus years in the corporate sector myself, it's always amazed me how, we can have generalizations about an entire gender. At the end of the day, it's always about an individual. And part of what we found as we went through the discussions, I think the perception fixing also starts to happen when you have more senior women, and particularly in decision making and leadership roles. I think that's what sets off the culture of everyone feeling included, and maybe part of where where this heads to. I can see.
Shweta, you're back.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfectly.
Oh, excellent.
Okay. I think, Shweta, my question originally for you was also around perceptions, right? Just building off from what Bala was just talking about. I think one of the themes we've heard about is this theme of being a diversity hire, but honestly, at the root of it is the similar perception issue that that Bala was describing. So it'll be good to get your inputs on this as well.
Yeah. So I think, where it starts is really the communication the firm makes around these hires, right? Obviously, diversity is a buzzword, and everybody's trying to increase diversity in their teams. But the communication really has to be, why are we doing these hires, right? Because genuinely we believe that rather than have a homogeneous set of male, or it is male candidature, or not no ethnic diversity or whatever, leads to not poorer decision making, or what, not as good a decision making if you have a more diverse pool, right? So there is genuinely enough studies available to say that if you have a diverse pool, you have better outcomes, you have better outputs, you have better decision making, right? And I think that is where the communication really has to start, from the top of the firm. Once you start there, and then really, that is why you say we want to increase diversity in the firm, right? Then it doesn't become about we just need to somehow fill the our pool with diverse candidates, right? That is what Advent, as a firm, is also focused on, and we've also communicated top down that that is the reason we need diversity. After that, of course, you still could battle perceptions, once you enter the firm, because obviously we are all trying to increase the gender diversity in each of our firms. So there is, I would say, somewhat a murmur around that are we sort of almost doing a little bit of bias in the other direction, where we are force fitting candidates, right? But frankly, if the communication is there and it's consistent, and then people finally see the delivery and the outputs, I think over time it will go. Will it go away overnight? I think the answer is absolutely no. In the initial phase, as we are trying to correct, as the BCG study was saying, where at the associate analyst level, we are, pretty not bad as an industry, but at the senior level, we are really poor when you look at the metrics, right? There will be this initial issue. But I think over time there will be a correction if the consistent communication is there top down from the group, from the firms, I would say.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's aligned with what Bala was talking about as well, which is just some of these changes take time. And yes, there are some perceptions to deal with in the interim, but it settles down as people see results and the outcomes of actually promoting gender diversity in the workplace. Maybe Kunal, if I switch to you now, you've been trying to promote gender diversity, I'm sure, as one of the leaders in your firm. It'll be interesting to hear about, are there any challenges or any pushback that you've heard when you've tried to promote gender diversity? How do you overcome this? And are there some interventions as you are going through this process yourself as a leader that you found particularly helpful?
Yeah. Thank you, Kanchan. First, I would say that, look, measurement is the first step to improvement. And I would say kudos to WinPE and BCG for continuing to shine a light on gender diversity with this report, right? There's clearly a lot more awareness on gender diversity and the positive impact that diversity brings. Shweta talked about it as well. And at Risk Capital as well, we really foster diversity of opinions and perspectives, and therefore everybody gets it, that gender diversity will add to the quality of our discussion, better decision making, and all of that. So I don't think there's a pushback as such to say, why are we trying to promote gender diversity? I think everybody gets that. The bigger issue is, how do you make it happen in practice versus just saying that you're supporting it, right? And Nupur talked about it as well. I mean, we are one of the laggards here. We've been around for a very long period of time, but clearly, our gender diversity is much lower than where we would like it to be. So what are some of the interventions that we are doing? Better late than never. I would say that, there are a few areas to it, and it has to be driven from the top, right? Because it's a change for the organization, and you want to make sure that there's a buy-in at the highest levels, and therefore there's a buy-in across the organization. Now, some of these interventions may seem very small, but in the context of, for example, what BCG said on flexible hours, right? Is it just lip service? Is it just a policy? And the people who end up using it are, kind of wondering whether they're doing the right thing for their career progression, right? We started a mini kind of work from home even before COVID was around, and everybody took advantage of it, right? The partners, the senior folks, the junior folks as well. We're currently in hybrid thanks to COVID. Everybody is, doing it in the way that works for them. So when you see the signaling coming positively from the senior people, it makes it more comfortable for everybody else. This is a really, really minor point. I'll give you another point on recruiting, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the challenges we face. The same point that Roshni made around lateral versus the junior levels. Like most firms, it's been at the junior levels, but 10 years ago, even the candidate pool wasn't really there. The feedback would be, you want me to hire a good candidate, the talent pool is very weak. Now we don't get that message, right? The biggest places we recruit from, consulting firms, investment banks, are very well populated with really high quality female candidates. And so we are making sure that message is given to the folks driving the screening process itself, who are then giving the message to the recruiting firms. I think these are some of the things that you have to do to start making an impact. But I completely agree, there's a long, long way to go. And then the last thing I would say that, clearly we need the people at the top to believe in it and evangelize it within the firm, rather than leave it to, the few women that maybe they're in the industry or in your firm to do it. And that's a constant effort that we're working on.
I'm happy to add to that, Kunal. I think all important points, and just a couple of things that I've seen work well. Both in terms of what we're trying to do at A91, where at this point in time I would say we are laggards in terms of ability and having enough diversity at the mid and the senior level, and my prior experience at Sequoia, where I think we did a pretty good job in having in the growth team we had 2 women early hires who became mid-level and senior, and one of whom is now an MD, and one of whom is leading growth in another private equity firm. So looking at those 2 examples, 3 things I think worked well for us. One is internally, whenever we communicate diversity, we say it's gender diversity and all kinds of diversity. I think that has been good for both hiring. That also makes sure that when we speak to recruiters, they are careful about the language they use. And on occasion, we have had a situation where one of our women, folks in the firm was involved in the next hiring, the next time when we were trying to hire somebody. And I remember at the end of the process is when she really came and said, VT, I've been in the firm for 3-4 years. Now I really feel I was not a diversity hire. I was as good, if not better, than somebody else. So sometimes I feel shining the sunlight on the recruitment process, because it's not like an opaque process, right? And as senior people, you can open it up to younger people, even as the process evolves, for them to realize that, hey, look, the standard and the bar is the same. It's just about looking and looking harder and looking more deeper. So that is something that has worked well. And I think that's a part of the whole, I would say, if you want to champion the cause, you should allow sunlight in the process, and I think that helps candidates get confidence and people feel comfortable. The second is when we draft these policies, get folks to draft policies and communicate it. Communicate it throughout. Communicate it in an analyst orientation. Communicate it at the time of orientation, and finally, push people to demonstrate. I'm very proud that, one of our younger partners, became a father, and he actually took a meaningful chunk of the 6 months, which was eligible for him. Until he did that and demonstrated that, I think it would be hard, otherwise, it always becomes a maternity leave conversation, right? As though like taking care of babies is only the mother's responsibility, right? So I think you need to see policy in action. You need to encourage people. And if there are snide remarks passed around it, you have to kind of cut it very fast. Because otherwise, if people don't demonstrate policy, senior people don't demonstrate policy through action and are proud about, showing up in the office 3 days after the baby is born, I think that is disastrous. I think that's just a big morale deflator. You can have all the great policies in the world, but then it really feels like many of these policies were designed only for, one set of people. So I think second is just demonstrating action. Have few policies, but just make sure that people follow it, especially senior people. And that is, I would say, really worked well for us. And the third thing that has helped is, some sort of mentorship and identifying mentors, for younger and even mid-level, senior folks. And here I hate to say this, but we've realized, at least I've realized, that you need to find senior women mentors, because how much ever of a champion I may be, I just don't relate to some of the challenges. I can neither articulate it nor really, be truly empathetic about it. I can talk about it, like in a panel like this, but I don't really get it. And thankfully, one of one of the women colleagues actually told me that, saying, hey, you just don't get it. So can you just find me someone senior woman whom I can talk to? Because then I'll figure out how to do this. Especially, first baby or second baby or older parents who need care. She said, you just don't get it. So can I just talk to somebody? So I think we have to be, have the conversation, and then I think then it really becomes possible to, champion and help, help women.
Thanks, VT. Very relevant set of comments. And I was just reflecting back on, I think in my firm, we made this journey a little while back. But one of the first things that we did was exactly what you were describing, which is when we sat down to write the flex time policy, for example, I was not the only person. I was in a team with 4 other men. And, along with some of the women starting to take it, we really went out of our way to encourage a few men to actually take it, because at the end of the day, it's about normalizing it. It's not about maternity benefits. It's about anyone being able to deal with, the personal situations that come up, honestly, for both genders. It's so that's a very important point that you've made there. And maybe partly also just switching into, a slightly different conversation, I think part of which you already started talking about, VT, but this issue about accelerating the representation of women at the mid and particularly the senior level roles in private equity, in venture capital. I think hiring could be one of the answers, lateral hiring. As many of you have noted, the pools are getting better that you recruit from. But I'd like to believe that's not the only answer, right? There is also an important point around retention, and actually, now that we are starting to get women in at the mouth of the funnel, how do you actually make sure that they go through and get to the top, and you have the same 40% ratio at the senior level a few years out. So maybe it'll be helpful to get commentary. Maybe VT, you can start, and I'll be interested to hear about this from other panelists as well.
Yeah, no, I think this is a knotty, complex problem. Nupur articulated it, because many firms, we think of this as an apprenticeship business, and therefore there is always going to be the question of, do you just wait for time, trickle down or trickle up effect, and then say, hey, look, there'll be enough representation? Can you do something proactively? Don't have any answers or practical experience here, but a couple of ideas is, I think on lateral hiring, one of the things to learn from could be from other firms that have done a better job, or other professions like consulting, which I feel thought about this issue for longer, and maybe have even solved for it far more successfully than us. Private equity at the end of the day in India is still maybe an 18, 20-year-old profession, versus consulting, which has been on for at least 25, 30 years. So one is, I think we could learn from there, because they would have had very similar challenges. I think that's one. Second is, I wonder whether even lateral hiring, even if you're not able to hire somebody straight away in as investing, does it make sense to, look at alternate roles? Is it like is it operating partner roles, where it may be easier, to find pools of candidates who have done that? If you're looking for, an operating partner in tech, is that easier to find versus straight away in investing? Because otherwise, you'll just be poaching from other firms. And we heard that in one of the, WinPE, one of the WinPE meetings, right? Where literally, one private equity firm was like, we really groomed this candidate and you hired this person as a principal. And of course, said in a jocular fashion, but it was articulated. So then otherwise, how do you create more folks here? Otherwise, you're just looking around. I wonder whether that also is an interesting way of thinking about lateral hires. Now, that is going to be complicated, because you're going to have to navigate 2 steps, right? You first say, hey, you bring in the person for something, and then over a period of time, this person begins to do investing. But I've seen that work. We have had folks who have come in for business development or operating partner in a few portfolio companies, board positions in 3-4 companies, and eventually becoming an investor in the firm. I wonder whether that could be, another way of, helping accelerate the number of mid-career, or let's say more mid-level, folks on the private equity side. But would be curious to hear, what others have to say and add.
I'd like to add here. I mean, honestly, I actually slightly disagree with VT here, because I feel, if we give that opportunity to fudge that, then, all of us will go down that path, because that's an easier route to take, right? So you have to, tackle the problem absolutely upfront, right? And which is why, I think the thing that we discuss internally a lot, at least, and lateral hires are tough, because like you rightly said, it's a younger industry. Within that, I mean, when we go out, and we've had this discussion multiple times with headhunters, right? We have this Rooney rule across the firm now. I mean, the equivalent of the Rooney rule, right? Like NFL has, where you have to have some ethnically diverse candidates every time you hire. So for us, it's gender diversity. You have to see some diverse candidates. But we do find that top of the funnel is weak, right? I think the way to cut it is the other point you made, VT. So you really have to expand your horizons. If you're committed to this cause, you have to be slightly flexible and think about how do I, find the best consultant or the best banker and really get them on board. And maybe there's a little bit of a lead time in getting up there, and even though you're hiring them at mid-level, but if they're really smart, frankly, they will get there, right? So I think that's the way you have to tackle it, because the moment anybody gives any of us flexibility, right, as people running firms, we will go and find the next best alternative, and we'll be sitting and discussing the same thing 5 years later, I can guarantee you. So I genuinely feel that's the way to tackle it, as opposed to try and find, alternate ways like operating partners or business development people, so to speak.
If I may just add a perspective which is going to be a little more, I understand where VT is coming from. See, there's a culture aspect to it as well, and what the firm stands for, right? So we are very happy that over the last 4 or 5 years, we've really pushed the top of the funnel for associate hiring, and that 40% ratio. We are happy that at least we're there from something that would have been non-existent earlier. But clearly, it's not solving in the short run the leadership gap, right? Now, the challenge we have, this is more of a Chris Capital thing, but it's true, as Nupur and Rochelle talked about, most firms have tended to recruit at junior levels and groom from within as their culture, right? Chris Capital has probably done it more than most. So if I give you a perspective, today we have partners and managing directors on average who've been with the firm for 20 years. 6 out of 7 of us joined as associates, right? That's a very powerful point in building a strong culture and sending a strong message to someone who wants to build a long-term career in the industry, saying, hey, you can join as an associate and become a partner at Chris Capital, right? The flip side of it is, and to talk about lateral hires, in the last decade, we've hired one person above the VP level, one person, right? So if we suddenly change and hire laterally, right, what does that do to our culture? What does that do to the people who joined at the bottom and tried to rise up? I don't have an answer. Just as VT said, we don't have an answer to this, right? At the same time, it's not something that we should just say, okay, we're solving it in that 20-year time frame, and therefore we've done our bit, let's go away. So I like VT's suggestion of looking at other suggestions and role models. If you're happy hiring from consulting and investment banking with 2 years of experience, why not 10 years of experience? And continue to push that envelope. But I think we will have to traverse a path to get there.
Yeah. So I'd like to add a very different perspective here, which will probably lead to Sunil finally, is that I think if you look at our industry, it is changing character, right? What Shweta talked about, or what Chris Cap is talking about, or what VT talked about is Sequoia A91. If you look at the number of new GPs that have happened in the last 5 years in our country, it's amazing. And Rochelle is a classic example, right? Lighthouse Funds is she's a senior person. It's relatively new. I won't say that it doesn't belong to the bulge bracket funds or the global bulge bracket. Global bulge bracket funds. So as we change the structure of the industry in our country, and this is willy-nilly happening whether we like it or not, we are going to see younger GPs with women as leaders coming in. I truly believe that is one way to solve for it, because otherwise we are simply fishing in the same pond over and over again. All I'm saying is a pond is becoming a lake. Someday it will become, part of the ocean. And that's when we'll also literally be forced to say that, okay, hey, there is that successful entrepreneur. She sold her business. Why can't I take her as a general partner? And that's why I said, this will also be, why I said it will go to Sunil ultimately, is when LPs start looking at these GPs and say, hey, I can look at this first time fund or second time fund and I can fund them. We will start solving this problem in a rather out of box manner. That's, I think, is how I read the tea leaves, at least on this topic. Yeah.
No, thank you, Bala. So the only point that I would wanted to add here is that this is a long duration asset class. Okay, so there's only so many things you can do in short run and for short term. And as people grow within the firm and become more senior, there are two aspects to that. One is it is such an opinion and judgment business that there's a lot of inter-partner trust that is required in making those decisions and monitoring those decisions and also living with it in case they go wrong. Okay, so this is a very high trust role at senior levels, and that is why some tenure and some shared history is very important, so that it doesn't end up in a blame game. And that is why I'm not surprised people want to see people serve their time before they get to that level, and they can fully trust them to lead things and make those decisions on the fly in the so-called the investment battlefield. And the second related aspect is that if you're trying to do little too much too soon, it can probably destabilize partnership, which is something that the firms would not want to have, and secondly definitely would not want to come and explain to the LPs what really happened. So I would say we should definitely explore lateral hires. We have seen this in many firms, not not as much in India, but definitely outside India, where what VT said, people come in an operating partner role, or they come as as a kind of an operating role at a portfolio level or at a sector level. And if they have the investment chops and inclination, they actually make that lateral transition. So I think we have seen that it is not unheard of. It is very easily doable, definitely expands the pool. And I would say Indian private equity has finally reached that level where operating value add is kind of becoming very relevant to what people do. It's just not bankers and deal sourcing at this stage.
Yeah. No, thanks for that. I think the point of diversity, we are discussing gender diversity today, but I think as you look at recruiting pools, there is a broader point about diversity as well. Similar to what you all are describing, I think consulting also at one point used to be people join as associates and become partners, but we've changed a lot over the last 10, 15 years, and a significant ratio of partners now have actually been laterally hired at different stages in their career. So maybe it's also an evolution of as the sector starts to move and the pools keep on expanding, because it does give you access to other forms of diversity as well, not just gender diversity. But maybe I'll switch questions now to to a topic that has come up from women who are currently working in private equity, not so much about expanding the funnel. And it'll be good to get a perspective on this, I think, both from our male and female champions on the panel. But the question was around how do you make sure that evaluation processes as well as career advancement, actually the process becomes truly gender neutral and accounts for various life stages for all employees, right? I think a lot of this discussion is around women, but it could just as well even apply to men. But how do you make all of these processes, truly gender neutral and not just on paper or on policy was really the question. I don't know. Shweta, would you like to start?
Sure. So, I think it's a little bit of, time that will make it completely gender neutral, but I think there is some level of training, consciousness that goes into this, right? So obviously, I think VT said that at some point in time, and that's true, right? It's not easy for everybody to kind of envision at sort of their own various stages of life as to what the counterparty's issues could be, right? A young mid-level VP to understand what a younger VP or associate will need because she may be getting married or he may be getting married. I think it just may be harder, right? So I think there is a fair bit of training that should also go into it, is my belief, and we do that. Part of it is just unconscious, bias training that we have to go through. Part of it is the reverse of that, just understanding, right? Whether it could be that you're getting married or you're having kids or you have older parents to take care of. There could be 5 or 7, things that could be at that life stage of yours that requires some cooperation, right? So I think it's something that people will grow and learn once they hear or get trained to understand it. And then I think it becomes an integral part of the culture of the organization. And some of this also comes from, again, some people articulated that very well here, right? The men and the women following that same pattern, whether it is the men taking the entire paternity leave so that that is just seen as something normal. Men using the flexible work hours as much as the women are using it, right? And these are very, very powerful examples, because frankly, the biggest challenge you have is you are doing something different. Are you taking a maternity leave when nobody else is taking a paternity leave? It's really challenging, right? And we've all been there, seen that, right? Because you feel, are you one falling behind? Two, are people thinking you will get favored? So moment it becomes a little more sort of something everyone does in the organization becomes very, very acceptable, right? At least till such time you have enough senior women in the organization who, you can follow the lead from, and that will take a while. So I think having that sort of as a pattern setting eventually will definitely make people realize what the imperatives of various stages are, and probably incorporate that in the evaluation process as well.
Yeah,
Thanks.
so I just like to make a quick point here. I think Shweta put it very well. I think the point really also is about general interviewing techniques, right? I think we tend to put a partner in the room and say that okay, yeah, go higher. But what I do think can really help as an organization is we clearly define what are we really looking for in that from that hire, right? What is the kind of person, the personality, and I'm not talking gender, I'm talking about the attributes, competencies, experience, etc., etc., so that the focus and the focal point shifts to competencies rather than asking questions which are more to do with uh, ability to travel, ability to or ability to what happens if if you're planning a baby, etc., etc. I think that is a lens shift that I think the overall industry needs to develop. Not that we're not doing it, but I think somewhere the tendency is to ask that question. But if you're really saying that, hey, I'm looking for somebody with deep tech investing experience, then you better put a competent person who can evaluate that person on for tech investing rather than have this general interviewing style kind of a thing. I think that there is some work to be done there overall. I mean, I'm saying this not just for the PE industry, but I'm saying this for even many of the companies that we back, right? I think there is a general lack of or not lack. There's a lot of work to be done on the interviewing skills and patterns, which I think will also in a long go a long way in removing this inbuilt biases towards potential women hires.
Yeah.
I think the only thing I would like to add is, Adam Street as a global firm, we have, good gender balance. It's not something that we deliberately went for, but we ended up having one, and we have it across all levels. I would say our industry actually affords the possibility of people being judged only on results. Not on trying to, whether you're clocking the hours, whether you're there or not. It's about insight, it's about results, it's about focus, it's about getting things done. So people will understand that if these are small team environments, people understand you're going through various stages, but if you are delivering good output on your work, I think what we have seen is that you can actually create appraisal system which is very focused on outcomes rather than trying to disadvantage people or any gaps that might have. So I think our industry has a unique ability to be able to do that. You can actually be effective from many places. You can actually be somewhere else. And COVID actually taught us that not all of us need to be in office all the time to getting things done.
Yeah. Sunil, while I have you, there is one audience question I will pick up as well, which perhaps you're in a better position to answer. But the question is, are there any reservations or reluctance that you've seen across firms on mandating, sort of the tracking of this, right? KPIs, KRAs, whatever you call it, on diversity. And if so, what's the reason?
No, not at all. Actually, we actually find that this is what I call very intellectually stimulated asset class. And people really want to do really good work, and if they want to come across as savvy, smart, and create difference, create find great deals, do great stuff with the companies. So actually, we do not find that. To be honest, this conversation has come to the fore over the last 2.5 years. but the take-up rate at the GP level to be able to go and work at it has been phenomenal. Actually, maybe 15 years ago, there was not enough of talent pool to get in, but we see very high level of acceptance across all markets where people want to actually drive it. Interestingly, the non-investment roles actually had very good gender representation. So I think the work that needs to be done is the investment roles. And I don't think we saw pushback from almost anywhere in the world. Yeah.
Got it. No, that's very helpful, and I think that's consistent with what we saw amongst all the senior interviews we did as well. So maybe I have one question now for the male panelists who are with us today. But what does a good male champion of gender diversity look like for you? What kind of actions do you believe as a male role model you can take, which actually encourages this within your business and more broadly, for the sector? Happy with anyone to go first.
I can go first, before VTC steals all my thunder with all his great examples. So, not to be honest, have given a lot of thought. I think in my mind, a good role model is somebody who's, first of all, who's very well received by everyone, so he needs to be very fair and very objective. And that is probably is the backbone of role model here, because the first question that we addressed today, we don't want people to be pigeonholed into kind of diversity hire or people getting any kind of favor. So he needs to be very fair, very consistent. There are some behavioral attributes, having spoken to people over many years, I think these are some of the, I would say, general leadership trait, but definitely help in this regard. You got to be very inclusive, very open, very approachable, and to be very honest, very receptive about new ideas, what can be done. A little bit of empathy, active listener, and very good at social conversations, to be honest. I think this kind of help people who are finding their feet, giving them an opportunity and chance to kind of get to their soft points, and you need to be able to engage and include folks in discussions. I think sometimes there is here when there is this concept of, am I the only one here or am I the only two people here? People need to be engaged in that conversation and should feel like they got their say, they had their point of view taken note of. So those are some of the behavioral attributes, but I'll let Viti and Kunal add. I think these guys are practicing it a lot more.
I can add.
I also go.
I
also go before VT steals the show.
Go ahead.
No, I actually don't have that much more to add. I think we spoke about walking the talk a little bit, making sure that policies are not meant for a set of people, but are firm policies, right? And it doesn't have to only apply to gender, right? It can apply to diversity of all kinds. There's the other thing, which is what I said, in male-dominated firms, you need to do extra. You can't just leave it to what the normal is, because you're trying to push the envelope. And that means actively pushing the agenda. VT made that point, to make sure that when somebody is making some snide remark here, you can't laugh it out. You can't just brush it under the carpet. So you need to be extra focused on ensuring that this is something that the firm really prioritizes. But I think what's even more important is to make sure that the culture embraces that diversity, right? So it should not be something that the partners want because it sounds good, or the partners want because Sunil is pushing us. It should be because it's in the interest of the firm. And everybody should first buy into that. And that job also belongs to the partners, to ensure people understand that we are all pulling in the same direction. Once that is set in place, I think everything else becomes a lot easier, because there is no us versus them here, right? So I think that is very critical. Also, as somebody mentioned to me, when you're going down the straight fairway, it's much easier. When you're trying to change behavior, you need to have somebody senior who has the authority and is pushing that agenda, which is, again, what you can do from the top. So take the leave, take the maternity leave, take the flex hours leave, ensure that your evaluation process is as transparent as possible. We have less of the issue right now because we have the bigger problem where our gender diversity is at the associate level. So it's a lot easier to say, we don't have much of a gender gap, we don't have much of a career progression gap. These are problems that will come to us, as people rise through the organization. But I think that's all I had to add.
Happy to go last. Kanchan, unless you have some other question, and if you want to move
please
forward.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just thinking and reflecting on what Sunil and Kunal said. A couple of things that came to my mind. I think one is if you're working with women colleagues and especially younger women who are trying to who are trying to move forward and who are trying to really become senior. I think what has helped, and of course I'd actually like the women to answer this, but I think what has helped is career advancement conversations. As opposed to generic conversations around what does it take to succeed or what does it take to be a good investor. Saying, hey, what does it take for me to be a principal? What will it take for me to be an MD? And giving very clear direction that also forces the firm to be sharper in what will it take for them to become successful. But having them, I think, has helped. I think that has something that has certainly helped colleagues navigate. Second is, I think, the point that Kanchan you already mentioned, which is whenever any generalizations are made, really react strongly, right? Because normal distributions are great for theoreticians and academic folks, right? We are really talking about individuals. So as much as possible, just avoid that conversation. Third is a bit controversial, and I'll put it out there. I think that I have noticed that older successful men do need coaching / feedback on how things are changing in terms of language, in terms of biases, in terms of what is acceptable, and Shweta's laughing. Shweta, this has nothing to do with that. But I'm just saying I've noticed in a more generic context because the way they would describe parenting. First of all, I don't think of maternity leave as a leave. I think it should be rebranded as maternity work. I think that's like the biggest, the worst thing that we could have done. Classic, misnaming something which is actually a lot harder work than going on a holiday, right? So I think it's about that as well. And I think, and maybe Shweta is right, it's about having those bias trainings and pushing people to take that. Because, things are changing rapidly around the world. And I can see, even I struggle with how things are changing. So I can see why it would be harder for older people.
Thank you for that. Maybe just have a minute or two if Bala or Shweta, you want to add on anything on what you expect to see from a male role model. Any additional thoughts?
So I shall be controversial and say I actually don't believe in role models because honestly, I think like to pick on what VT just finished with, there is so much change. I mean, are we really relevant to today's world? I mean, I think whether it is female or male, I'm not just talking about anybody. I think that the challenges that the youth will face as they come into our industry will be far different from what I went through. Yes, but the only one line suggestion that I can give to everyone as a mentor is just believe that you are doing what you wanted to do and you'll be successful at it. But everything is changing so fast. I really cannot think of anyone being a relevant role model. Unfortunate but true. That's the way I think.
Yeah. No, nothing major to add. I mean, since I laughed at VT's last comment, I have to say that I do echo a little bit of that, right? There is this change that has happened, and there are some parts of the older generation which I would think need to kind of develop higher awareness of that change, right? Whether it is training, whether it is just broader, more not propaganda, but more articles, newspapers, or whatever the way of means could be, right?
Yeah.
And that is one bias at the broader level that needs to get broken. You do still see that sometimes, I would say, I mean, a lot less now, but I mean, a lot of the younger female colleagues would probably see that a lot more, right? So that's where the gender bias needs to break. I think probably a lot more than, with folks that you see in this panel in some ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that difference is perhaps now moving on to, I would say, the broader generation as well, not just the younger female colleagues, but I think there is a gap that you can start to see in terms of just the thought process. I know we are at the end of time. Maybe one last question from my side, and I'm looking at the audience questions as well, and then we can sort of end there. While I know there is a lot more that we can continue to cover. So I think there is a combination of a couple of questions here. I think one is around just how do you create the cultural acceptance for policies. I think we've already talked about that a fair bit, so maybe maybe we'll gloss over that one for now. But there was a second question around saying, does setting a culture of diversity always have to start from the top? Is there something that we can do at the mid-level to make a meaningful difference while we are as we are going through this journey? So I thought that was a slightly different take on the topic. Maybe we can cover that. And
I think just a small point I'll make is you have to put targets in some ways. Now, some of it can be quantifiable, some not, right? But clearly, you need one person at the top is not going to drive the entire change, right? And so take recruiting. Let's say recruiting is screening done at the director level and eventually goes to the partner. If the director doesn't do their job, you're not going to get the candidate pool. So clearly, you need to set the right targets. You need to measure people against them, and you need to reward or punish accordingly. But to do all of that, you need the buy-in. So I come back to that overall point, right? They shouldn't be doing it to get the bonus or to hit the KRA.
Yeah, so the metrics and the measurement is important, but the outcome of that measurement is has to lead to the right results. It's not measuring the numbers for the sake of it, which is what leads to what Shweta described as fudging earlier, and some of you alluded to that as well. Thank you very much, Kunal, Sunil, VT, Bala, Shweta, for being with us. I think this has been a fantastic conversation. I feel like I could go on for another couple of hours, but I think we'll need to stop now. Thank you. And I think there are a few comments and questions from the audience as well, which we'll share with you offline.
Thank you for hosting this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you everyone for your very interesting comments. And we're seeing a lot of interaction from the audience. I think there's one thing that I will answer for. Kanchan, you made this very interesting question about what male role models should do. And this is out of personal experience, right? I had 3 male founding partners and I was the only investing woman. And I remember the partners coming up to me and saying, look, there are so many things, and they themselves on their own, there's so many things we cannot answer for you. And we can never be your role model or your mentor. And we cannot make everything lighthouse. And they immediately connected me with women from the industry because, there were so many things that I didn't know that I could ask for. And I think that helped me immensely over the years. And I think that is something that, the other firms can also adopt. And hopefully we'll have enough and more senior women in the industry to have role models. But thank you everyone for your time and your interesting insights, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. So while we're moving on to the next segment of today's session, over the past few years, we've been collecting a lot of reflections and thoughts from the members of WinPE, and we've made a small video montage to recollect all of them.
I take this opportunity to share the benefits I have derived from being part of WinPE's platform. My participations at WinPE's programs can be dated back to its beginning, and I have immensely learned from WinPE's seminars, events, and trainings. In fact, I'll go on to say that I owe my current job to WinPE. I got to know about the job opening and applied for it through WinPE's Career Bulletin platform. WinPE so readily, easily, and in a simplified form had brought this opening to me, rather than I having to go and search for it. I had the chance to access truly progressive-minded, gender-diverse workplace through WinPE.
We are in process of expanding our team in India, and in that context, we have been in touch with WinPE, and what we found was something quite special. Actually, we found that WinPE brings together a wide network of talented women at various stages of their careers on one platform. This is valuable not only to the women benefiting from this exchange of experiences and ideas, but also to industry participants like ourselves, who want these talented women to partner with us. And we find that WinPE is doing a tremendous job in enhancing the participation of women in the PE industry.
The reason why I resonate with WinPE is because as basic as it may sound, the fact that women at the entry level of PE is a very, low in number, and handful only make it to the top management or even get promoted. And I think that is due to various reasons, either due to gender stereotype, or women are not skilled enough, or we are not given equal opportunities. And I think WinPE is doing a great job.
People prefer to work with men because it just minimizes their inhibition and they are more comfortable working with men. But I think it's important to raise that dialogue, and I'm very, very proud of the fact that I'm working with WinPE, and WinPE is making a step in that direction.
Helped me increase my confidence as well as interact with a lot of women in the investing domain. Some of the initiatives of WinPE, like the masterclass series that provide technical knowledge into the investing domain, as well as the Ignite sessions where a young woman can really gain an understanding of how to get into investing, what are the things to prepare for to get into investing. Such initiatives have really put an unstructured course in the investing world into a much more feasible and approachable path.
I completely resonate with WinPE due to their commitment to get more women into investing early on. Through several of their initiatives, WinPE is creating the right knowledge, awareness, mentorship support, and providing young investing aspirants a very guided strategy on how to get into investing and what are the role models to look up to.
Thanks for showing that video. It also shows the amount of work that WinPE has done over the years. It's my privilege to introduce the next panel. These women, industry stalwarts, they've been champions and advocates for WinPE over the years. Introducing Anita George, who is an industry stalwart in herself, who until recently was the EVP and the deputy head of CDPQ Global. Renuka Ramnath, the founder, MD, and CEO of Multiples Alternate Asset Management. Zia Modi, who is the co-founder and managing partner of AZB and Partners. And moderating today's panel, we have with us Nupur. Over to you, Nupur.
You're muted. Nupur, you're on mute.
I did it again. Thank you, Renuka.
Can I keep the speaker on, or is there an echo?
I think you can keep it on. I think it's okay. So a very good evening, good morning, good afternoon to everyone, and a very, very warm welcome to Anita, Renuka, Zia, our advisors, our guiding lights, and women who continue to inspire not only me and the team at WinPE, but the whole industry, and I think beyond the whole industry as well. So a privilege to have you here. It's been 2 years since WinPE was launched, and I thought we could take time today to share with all our friends and supporters some of the achievements of these 2 years, and also an inside look into what's coming up from WinPE. So I thought, maybe we can start from the beginning. And so I've got some slides here. So at the very beginning, I set a WinPE with an objective of increasing the participation of women in the investing and entrepreneurship ecosystems. Now, female representation in PEVC has hovered around 20% for a very long time. And the amount of PEVC funding to women-led businesses has stayed in the single digits. Depending on the report, it has hovered between 2.5% to 7%. As per the 2019 IFC report, there is a positive correlation between the presence of women in an investing team and the presence of women-led businesses in the investment portfolio. And to me, it made complete sense to acknowledge the interlinkages between the investing and the entrepreneurial ecosystems and see how we could start to catalyze changes through interventions at different points in these ecosystems. And this is basically the approach we took. We said, all right, we have an ecosystem which comprises of PVC firms, PVC backed companies. We've got women entrepreneurs, and then we've got women investors and PVC aspirants. And if we look at this ecosystem holistically, how is it that we can start to create some sort of a positive transformation? And I remember distinctly my initial discussions with each of you. And, I feel incredibly delighted and lucky that how quickly each of you agreed to guide WinPE and be the advisor. So, if I start with you, Renuka, what would you say when you thought about it? It's a rather obvious question, but what was your view on the need for a platform like WinPE?
So no, I would say that the women representation in our industry is, dismally low, is a very well-known fact, and women represent 50% of the population or thereabouts. And all of us know through various statistics that women in colleges, women in engineering colleges, women in management colleges, or even pursuing serious professional career is a very high percentage. It may not be 50, but it's well upwards of 33. And why is it that in the PEVC industry, we don't see any women at all? Actually, it won't be unfair to say we don't see any women because the percentage is so low. So we are missing out on the opportunity of bringing in talent of a very, very large universe that is available, especially in a country which is going to go through this very high growth and where talent is going to be the scarcest commodity. And therefore, how do we encourage this capable women to come and look at PEVC as an attractive career choice is, I think, a very obvious imperative, Nupur. And I will also say that given your personal background, given that you have been an investor, you know this fraternity very well, you know the nature of the job of people like us who make investments, you know the nature of job of people like what you have been, giving money to people like us. You are thickly involved in the ecosystem, you understand the challenges and you understand the need. And therefore, backing someone like you for a very obvious imperative was a no-brainer for me.
Thank you for that vote of confidence, Renuka. Anita, if I come to you next, you're actively involved with many initiatives that support gender balance and women's empowerment. What was it about WinPE that resonated with you?
I would say, Nupur, firstly, thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this journey with WinPE. And to be absolutely honest, the starting point was you, because I was fortunate to really see you in action, where you kind of shattered a lot of the stereotypes and molds that we have in the investment world, and you did it successfully. So I knew right from the word go that when you're going to build WinPE, it is going to be at a very high bar in terms of quality and content, and also that your style, which is very, very inclusive, would really not just help shine the light on gender diversity, but also build a community and network of both men and women who could come together to really make a difference in shining this light. Point number one. Two, I know you as a very results focused person. So I knew that very soon we would get into measurement, and I'm very happy to see that you are surely moving in that direction, because as one of the previous panelists, I think it was Kunal, who said, when you start measuring is really when you start seeing results. And most important, the things that often we take for granted, like having access to uh, people, to mentors, to both men and women who've been successful in investing, it's not that common. And what you've been able to do in terms of creating that community, every time we have one of our WinPE events or meetings, I'm always struck by the fact that you have as many men as we have women, which I think is key, because the change has to come from both sides. And other amazing things that you are working on, like the WinPE app. And I would say one thing that has struck me about WinPE, which has been very useful and valuable for me, is meeting the young aspiring women in the WinPE network. And I see how much more savvy, confident, and capable they are in terms of expressing what they feel, expressing their capabilities, being able to debate and challenge us. And I think the things that you're doing, like the WinPE app, is just taking it to that next level for all women at different levels. And what I'm challenging myself with is to grow along with WinPE to become more of someone who can communicate better and connect better with the community that you've created. So I really thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Anita. That was incredibly kind of you. Zia, you have a bird's eye view of the whole industry and a deep understanding of how this business works. And at the same time, you're also known to have a strong empathy for the professional woman and her challenges. So, when you decided to give your time to WinPE, what was your vision for WinPE?
So, like Renuka and Anita have said, Nupur, we all are willing to give our time provided we are convinced there'll be outcomes, right? And we all know we have very limited time. So, for me, you were the catalyst for the outcome, basically. So, I think that I thought that WinPE started off with a level of seriousness, with a level of deep commitment. We've seen from the last panel how dismal the stats are, and how there is, as Shweta said, a really long way to go. And somebody has to start taking ownership and being the champion of that and making it happen. And so I think that I believe that you driving your organization, which you are so passionately committed to, was something that was worth participating in, and for all of us to be happy about. It's what you say, right? Data is driven and data is data. But how do you influence what comes out of the data? And then how do you measure what you're really doing step by step? As Anita says, you're data driven, and that's great because you can't lie about data. You can slice it and dice it, but it's right out there. So I think that really it was hoping that your initiative would start, would complete, would continue with a level of commitment and seriousness that would actually then result over a period of time in more women entering this space. And I believe your initiative already has results. I believe in small steps at a time. There is no big bang in life anymore unless you get married. But apart from that, It's a good platform where I think more and more women are comfortable, younger women, to join it. As we've seen from the show before this, that they feel they've gained from it, and I think that it's a way forward for a lot of initiatives that will come to your mind, to the people who've participated. We will learn from mistakes. We will be able to open more doors, all to ensure that our women take those steps to reach the top. So that's why I think WinPE is great.
Thank you so much. This is encouraging, motivating, but at the same time, I have to say, whenever I'm waiting for Zia to say something, there's a little bit of a fear inside me. There's a part of me that's scared of what Zia is going to, say. Is she going to haul me up for forgetting something? So, I am so glad that we are meeting all of your stringent and high expectations. So a little bit of okay, sorry about that. A little bit of what we are doing. Let me share some of this. So this is the engagement that we've had with firms, and we've been very focused on driving an outcome-oriented agenda, which is as of now focused on creating fundamental changes. So, for example, if you look at the four things highlighted here, it starts with saying how are we building awareness and recognition and corresponding action for the challenge at hand. Starting with creating overarching principles, internal policies and guidelines, things like, how do we sensitize decision makers, and then how that translates into talent management. Mandating a threshold for diversity in the candidate pipeline, looking at blind screening in the evaluation process to eliminate any kind of biases, finding mentorship and other resources to support women who are already there, and then following that up with measurement and tracking. So at WinPE member firms measure data at the firm level and at the portfolio level at every 6 months, and they share that with WinPE. And at WinPE, we aggregate that data and we benchmark all our member firms with the market. At the same time, there are a lot of firms who've started creating internal review mechanisms, started integrating diversity KPI as part of, say, things like a portfolio review meeting or an operational review meeting. And then from there, what we're building towards saying is that how do we start spreading this out into the ecosystem? For example, in the last year, we've created a platform where we are working with the PEVC backed companies that are, basically companies backed by the WinPE member firms, and talking about very specific challenges. The current challenge that we are all talking about is how do we increase the number of women in a sales team at the field level, like a real, tangible, practical problem, and trying to figure out a solution. And that's very exciting for us. We're thinking about how to build diversity at boards of PEVC-backed companies, and we've got commitments from all our member firms on driving campus level initiatives. Right. So for us, this is all about getting to outcomes, and hopefully these outcomes over a period of time will also start to translate into tangible numbers. But while we are thinking about all this work that we want to do with firms, I think it is very important to have this discussion on why should PVC firms actually take on this additional work. Why should they be a part of WinPE? And Zia, could I call on you for this question?
Sure. I think I would put it back with a question, which is why not? All right. If every PVC firm says that they are committed to these outcomes and to this agenda, and that they are invested in promoting their women, then what WinPE has to demonstrate that it is a platform that delivers. I think that is the key. And if by joining WinPE, they have access to ideas, new initiatives, sharing, a little bit of peer pressure, a little bit of access to more talent, all of the above. I think it makes perfect sense for them to support a community which is vested in their ESG agenda. I mean, today, even their target companies have to demonstrate this achievement. So even one step at a time is good enough, because, unfortunately, we don't have that whole pool of ready-made young women who can just jump up. They themselves have to be nurtured, trained, inducted, initiated. And so if you are committed as an organization, then you have to put your money where your mouth is, and to join an NGO which is trying to really do the right thing. And if you like that right thing, then I think this membership does add value, simply because it's so many like-minded people. And like-minded people can talk frankly, discuss their failures, celebrate each one's success. And there's no competitiveness about this. We're all hoping for the same outcome, right? That's why.
Thank you, Zia. Renuka, you are a fund manager, so as to speak, and at IVCA, you've really heard from the industry, and you understand the issues and the concerns that the industry by and large has. Why would you think that PVC firms would stand to benefit from working with WinPE?
So, as I mentioned before, I think the world belongs to those who can attract, retain, and get them to deliver. And we have seen that there are people who are highly, highly successful as CFOs, other CXOs, uh, as great commercial bankers, investment bankers, and so on. So, are women capable of taking on big responsibilities and delivering, equally successfully as men? I think there is no doubt in that area. But our industry, partly because it's very, very young in the country compared to some of the other industries, and also it doesn't recruit huge numbers. When we think about commercial banking, we can easily think about 2 lakh employees and 1 million employees in a bank and so on. Our industry is not driven so much by huge numbers. And thirdly, as various other panels discussed as well, there have not been enough female role models. And I'm a very, very big believer that, there is a psychological comfort around joining organizations and staying where you see other women who have climbed up the ladder, who have also had a good family, who have raised children, and done all of this in balance. There is great comfort in being in that cohort as opposed to being where you sometimes or many times feel very lonely, that I'm very different from all the men here and I don't feel comfortable to share either my problems, or for that matter even give all the talent that I have. Right, it is an inhibition that you may suffer yourself as somebody who's in very, very small minority. So if one has to break all of this and make the private equity venture capital industry as attractive a place for these talented women to come and give their life and make a career, we need to raise the awareness. We need to give that social network, as Zia talked about. We need a place where we can exchange our fears and excitement without being judged or without having a consequence when we go back to work. We need a place where we can learn. We need a place where we can network. In one of the panels, they also spoke about how women feel more inhibited to network, where everyone else there is a man, right? So I think there are many, many soft aspects to making someone comfortable in an industry. And only in an institution like yours, what you have founded and what you're leading, like WinPE, can really provide the solution for the industry. And people, at the end of the day, I would say, being completely selfish, if we can include a lot of women, highly capable talent to serve our industry as opposed to other industries, I would do anything for it, because our business is only about attracting and getting the best talent to deliver.
Thank you, Renuka. And I think what you said about models is so powerful. Earlier today, and I know you were in the session, but not sure if you were listening in or not. But I actually sort of called out this whole discussion on lateral hiring to say that,
Yeah,
Renuka,
I was there.
as an investor, right? In many ways, you were a lateral hire into the industry. And well, I think that is the kind of role models that we have. And I think that is how, we can continue pushing the envelope.
I would, however, say, Nupur, that, ICICI was a place where if you put up your hand for something, they would not stop you. So it is, the organization will not stop you because you are a woman or you have not done this job, right? And I feel that WinPE can get a lot of women to volunteer to by raising these conversations, right? By creating this very favorable momentum and conversation around the virtues of the PEVC industry, and that nobody needs to have a mental curtain, put for PEVC. To create that environment, and no single institution is large enough to do that because of the very nature of our industry. We are all 20, 30 people organization. We cannot make a revolution, but together we can make a revolution, especially if an independent organization like yours is championing it and all of us are behind it, fueling this entire thought process.
Thank you, Renuka. Anita, you've been an institutional investor and an LP for so long. And, I think when you look at the need for working on gender diversity, there is another perspective, and there is almost like a market force here that the industry needs to think about. So, what would you say, what would be your message to all the funds and fund managers who are on the fence right now? What is really the market force that is driving forward this agenda?
So I would say the market force is here already. It's coming. And rather than wait for it to push you to take action in a hurry, build it already in your own style, bringing in your own culture. And something that Renuka mentioned just now, which is get the best talent. So don't wait for someone to come and, wave a bag of capital to say you want this, you have to do this. Do it yourself. Do it in your style. Do it building your own culture. And that's going to be so powerful. And then they will be running, the capital will be chasing you than the other way around. The other thing I would say is that I think it's very important to truly believe that diversity delivers value. And for those of us with gray hair, you learn that as you go along, that diversity truly delivers value. And you can see that across communities, across organizations, even within families. And so that's something else where I think if you have that belief, then you go about building it in a very creative and in a way which take away from the culture and focus and philosophy, investing philosophy of your firm.
Thank you, Anita. Um, you know, um, from here, I would like to now sort of change track a little and talk about the work that WinPE's done in engaging with women. Here I think it has been a lot of action on our front. And yes, the numbers are very impressive: 18 months, more than 30 events, more than 70 industry leaders, more than 3,700 participants, 96% NPS. We've got role models, we've got mentors, we do career boot camps, etc. But I think, beyond all of this action packed engagement, this slide is a little representation of what really motivates the team at WinPE. It is an engagement of trust, and some of the innermost pain points that we have heard from women And some of the quotes that are on the screen, most of us would not even imagine that these things existed anymore. So yes, we have testimonials and we have the hurrahs, and we have another lineup of testimonials coming after this session. But through our different conversations, and especially with the workshops, the focus group discussions that we've been doing with women in investing, we've heard of many personal incidents that I think disrespectful is a very mild way of describing. Yes. But beyond that, we've also heard about women's own challenges in saying, how do I carve out time for investing in myself? I commit for a workshop, and then my manager calls me and says, there is a client meeting, there is an internal meeting, there is an IC meeting, and a memo which is due. And it is very difficult for women to prioritize. And, these are the sets of challenges we've been hearing about. One is the disrespect that they end up facing and discrimination that they end up facing. The other part is their own inability to find the right balance, or, maybe demand the right balance is probably the right word. So if I have to request you, as women who've been through this journey in many different phases and many different backgrounds, Anita, you've seen this many a times. You've mentored a lot of women who've been through different life events and challenges. What would be some of the thoughts that you have? What would be the advice that you would like to share with these women?
I think one very important thing, however difficult, is for women to speak up. Because often, if you don't speak up, it's difficult to know what the person is going through and what help and support they need. And this is something that I've always encouraged my colleagues and others to do. The second I would say is to really focus on things that are under your control, where you can deliver your best, because that's where really people judge you and in a way determine the value that you bring to the organization. So those areas where you have control, where you can deliver your best, make sure that you do that. The third area is, I would say, to be creative and not believe that you have to kind of fit into a mold. And I've seen that women who are courageous enough to do that have actually outshone in many different ways and have taken on leadership positions. It may not be a title, but it could be just being a natural leader, pushing for getting things done. And those are things where I think a lot of the women who've been in difficult situations have kind of stepped back and said, okay, I can let this happen to me, or I can fight back in a way in which I make a change for the whole organization. And I've seen women who've done that, whether it's coming back after having a baby, or it is taking a break for a few years and then coming back into the industry, and that takes a lot of courage. And I think often people don't realize that it really takes a lot of courage to take those steps. But I've seen that when women have done that, they've been able to go way beyond had they just stayed in the organization or followed a very narrow path. So I would really encourage women, speak up, do what you can do under your control really well, and be creative to bring your own solutions forward as well.
Thank you, Anita. Golden advice there, golden words there. Renuka, you've been through this journey, and you've also seen a number of women go through that journey in the industry, in your firm, in your portfolios. What would you advise, and what would you say? And I don't know, at some level, when I saw some of the quotes that we put on the slide there, um, I couldn't believe that things like that actually still exist, right? But they do. And then how do we, how do we encourage women to look beyond that and go back and center on themselves and, dig into their own confidence and their own esteem, self-esteem, and say, I can come out of this and I can, I can establish myself in this industry.
No, Anita has, articulated very beautifully. But what I would like to say to the young women is that people who went out and achieved, right, and progressed in this industry or otherwise, are not those who did not have stumbling blocks and hurdles along the way. They are those who had the inner conviction and determination against all odds to go out and win. They did not waste one moment regretting or remorsing the fact that a man is not understanding her aspiration. Instead, they figured out how to pierce through those people or move away aside from those people and go forward. So every obstacle I have faced, fortunately for me, my mental makeup is, if a no is told to me, my determination to make it happen doubles up. So I was told that as a widow, I cannot go to Saudi Arabia some 25 years back. And from that day, I had only one goal: I will go to Saudi Arabia. Right? So that's what I am made of. I'm not therefore prescribing this formula to everybody. But I simply want to say that ask yourself, how deep is your conviction? Don't look for problems outside. You are the biggest problem. I'll get beaten up for this because a lot of women may say you really don't understand what we go through. We have all gone through that. There will be typecasting, there will be stereotyping, there will be assumptions like what you have put on the slide, that they will have a baby, as though all the boys who join you are retiring from your company. Everyone is looking for who is paying me another lakh of rupees more. So the attrition, reasons for attritions are 1000, right? Of which the whole change that you go through from being not a mother to a mother is a very, very important one. But it is still one amongst 100 reasons why somebody doesn't stay with your organization. So if you see a small percentage of people who come with this narrow vision, shouldn't you bless yourself and say, how good, I'm not working for you? I will go and find someone who appreciates my talent, who is vested in scaling me up and my competency. And all I have to do is to have to explore more. I am so excited that it's so clear in my mind that I'm not joining you. And I have to now go out and explore a better place. So look at every obstacle as an opportunity to double down on your personal conviction. Always align yourself with people with positive motives, positive energy, something good to give you, and don't waste 1 minute of your time brooding over someone who was so unreasonable, unkind, who did not understand you, whether man or woman. I think a lot of it is in the hands of the woman. And again, I would say raising the decibel levels on this topic, getting more people to talk about it, creating a community, creating mentors, what you're doing, right? Having those collegiums, making all of us sit in together and say, hey, as a firm within this industry, what mandate are you taking for yourself? Are fantastic initiatives to bring consciousness. The moment you become aware of a problem, you will solve. Many times you make mistakes not because they were intentional, but you were blissfully unaware that you don't have gender diversity within your organization. So I would say that first email Nupur if you have some problems, and after that you can reach out to Zia and mere models like us, right? The first time I met Zia, we were doing a deal, and my God, she was so aggressive. And I used to think I'm the most aggressive woman I know. And after I met her, I said, my God, Renu, when will you become like her? So be inspired by people, who have been there and faced these challenges. Sorry, I'll stop here.
But let me just add to that, Renuka. So Zia was the lawyer for the other side, and I said after I saw her in action, I said that's the lawyer I want on my side. So having that knowledge, preparedness, doing her job at a level which is so remarkable. It stood out among all the men and women in that room. Zia stood out, and that's what I would say to all of us, whether man or woman. That's where we need to be.
Absolutely. And everyone has crossed those bumps and mountains and whatever chasms to get there. But I think that's the only thing I'll tell the women. Double down your
And as
conviction.
it doesn't matter that you fell, what matters is what you did after you fell, right? Absolutely, absolutely. So, Zia, now the spotlight is on you. But really, if you look at the other side, and yes, I mean, we have to, it is a fact that consistently all the senior successful women that we have spoken to through WinPE for the WinPE Insights, there is a pattern that these women have literally carried on with blinkers on. They haven't stopped to focus on the fact that I'm a woman, I'm the only woman, I'm an outlier, I'm an exception. They just sort of had blinkers on. They said, I'm here, I love my work, I'm going to do a great job, and I'm going to be successful. But then, so, once we've given women this advice, I think it is also important to see how, as WinPE, when we are working with firms, how can firms come in here? How can an employer create that space and that environment where women are able to say, yes, I understand there is a client meeting, but I do have a prior commitment for a particular workshop, or a meeting with my mentor or something which I believe is going to benefit me, and I would really like to continue with that. And can we try rescheduling this, or can somebody else do this for me? I mean, how can employers step up their support and create an environment where women feel free to invest in themselves?
That's a tough question, Nupur, because, at first blush, the employer will say, change the workshop and come for the client meeting, right? That's a normal reaction. I think it's really how women manage such requests. And I think the better way to say it is that, there is this workshop which after I attend, I'm planning to do a workshop in the office, which is really going to help men and women and improve our journey towards diversity and inclusion. And I'm telling you well in advance, and then can I block my calendar for it, right? And maybe 5 times out of 10, you'll succeed. I think that in all the communications that women have, it's all about communication. So what are we? I think the World Bank or some survey says that 48% of India's women drop out of the workforce. Our leaky pipeline is 48%, right? So if it's not about talent, which I believe it can't be, because we are talented and people need us and need our talent, then it's because we slip away quietly into the night. And we don't communicate enough to make our worth felt, and to realize that, there is a balancing in everything in life. Over aggression, as Renu and Anita have reminded me, have cost me sometimes. And in hindsight, I would have done many things differently. But I think that if women are more tactical, their engagement with their bosses and employers will be much more successful. By that, I don't mean being, too diffident or too submissive. That's not my point. But to understand how an organization works, to work within the constraints that you're going to find yourself, especially in the beginning, right? To deal with the disappointment, to deal with the constant guilt you face because of all the other things that is surrounding your life. And to take the deep breaths. I think that, sometimes we get so depressed, we just make a decision which we regret after a month. How do you then just take those deep breaths and go away? Take a day off, take 2 days off, pamper yourself, give yourself some me time, come back refreshed, and don't make impulsive decisions, which are really almost always at the cost of your career. So whenever somebody is looking harassed, or I can see that they're burning the midnight oil, I actually just preemptively call her in and say, which matters are you working on? Which partners are you working on? Call up the partners and say, here's a burnout candidate looking at you in the face. What are you doing about it? So basically, uh, uh, working with the women in your office, allowing them to come in and give you even silly pain points, which you can easily solve because you're 25 years older to them. But it's important that they can come and voice those pain points, because those then pain points become mountains when actually it can be just solved like this. I had a young woman associate who was really vexed that she had to have her driver take somebody to piano and somebody to something. And I said, just get another driver. Simple. You can afford it. What's the problem? Just get another driver. It hadn't even stuck her to get another driver. So, how do you keep building your infrastructure? How do you keep allowing the employer to think you're dependable, you're accessible, and still keep your personal space? It's not easy, actually, and it's a journey, but I don't think it's unachievable.
Thank you, Zia. And I've just been reminded of the time, and it's just that any conversation with the three of you can just go on forever, and we'll never run out of wisdom and advice. That's just going to turn our lives around. But I think we do need to move to the last section of our conversation, where we want to talk about WinPE's priorities going forward. The way we have thought about it is to say that in the last 2 years we've gathered a lot of learnings, a lot of experience, and we've understood where is it that we are seeing the maximum impact in terms of effectiveness of our engagement, and the fastest response from people that we are working with. So we want to continue to build and expand the ecosystem. I think what we've been able to do in raising the awareness and sort of move different parts of the ecosystem is quite great. We want to build on the successes of the work that we've been able to do with the WinPE member firms. We want to talk about long-term target settings, and we already have a working committee that's thinking about what is it that we want to achieve by, say, 2030, right? We want to step up our work on building communities and networks for women, especially as we see how we still need to ramp up the work on inclusion and de-biasing the community. The WinPE app is ready for beta testing, and we will be organizing our first post-pandemic in-person networking event in Mumbai in April. So we're very, very excited to be able to go back to really what was part of the original plan at WinPE. Just have a lot of in-person events, just bring people together. We are ready to launch the WinPE Women on Boards platform, and a formal announcement will be coming very soon. But we are extremely privileged to have some, very, very senior people as advisors for that platform. But stay tuned for more information on that bit. And with all of this, we'll continue to invest in technology and people, to find the best solutions. So, we are outlining all of these immediate priorities for WinPE. As the WinPE advisors, what are your favorite picks, and where is it that you think, what is it that you think WinPE could be missing, or where is it that you think we should be adding our focus to? But if you look at these priorities going forward, what would you choose, and what would you say we should add to the list? Who should I call on first? Should I call on?
Because I just want to take a minute to say that, in the 2-year journey of WinPE, what you've been able to achieve is pretty amazing. So I would say let's take just 1 minute to celebrate that. And I'm not just saying it to be when I see the number of firms and the people who have engaged, genuinely engaged, I think you've already made a great start. Where I think we need to do a lot more is really developing.
Sorry to interrupt. Nupur, do you want to mute yourself? when Anita is speaking because we are not hearing her clearly. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So one area which I think is very important, Nupur, is really developing the community and networks, because as both Zia and Renuka mentioned, this is really a community in effort to get the investment community to be more inclusive, to really bring in the diversity that we are looking to achieve. So I would say, even though I know when we've discussed that it's been difficult to get people to engage in some of these activities, but I think here persistence will pay, and creating those networks. And maybe one thing we can talk about more as we go along is how do we make it more relevant and personalized in some way, so that people can choose and come in and engage. So it might be more customization. And there, I think the use of technology could be one way to also bring in that personalization and customization, even though you want to reach out to a large community.
Thank you, Anita. Thank you. Renuka, what would you say? Where should WinPE go forward
I
from
know
here?
that you will want Zia to have the last word. So happy to
I'm
go
very
second.
scared of Zia. I keep delaying hearing from Zia. And I keep thinking you and Anita will be kind to me, and then Zia will also be kind to me.
No, first I
No, although
echo.
Zia, no, I
WinPE.
shouldn't say this. Zia, I'm very grateful for all your support, and I'm sorry, I shouldn't be saying this.
No. So, Nupur, one, I echo Anita's sentiments. 2 COVID years, just after you started WinPE, but the way you have gathered momentum, commitment, and the collegiums that you have conducted, the mentorship programs that have taken off very well. Excellent achievements. And I think once we are able to do the physical events as well, you will personally be able to also experience the energy and talk to people in person. I think that will be another major catalyst, in the coming years. So one of the big discussions we had in all the prior panels is, how do we have more lateral talent? How do we get more senior women in leadership? We have entry level funnel, which seems to be kind of sorting itself out. For that, increasingly now we are seeing women in CXO positions and CEO positions in large companies, small companies, women entrepreneurs. So speaking to your first point of expanding the ecosystem, if we can bring those role models into the PEVC industry, and maybe by actively engaging them, we may also facilitate some transition of those CXOs from operating companies into PEVC. And they can also be great mentors to other younger women, right, who are looking to make careers, and thereby expanding the funnel of women you can showcase to your members, right, or prospective aspirants in the PEVC industry. Maybe that can be a kind of a lateral initiative that you can take. And second, if we get men leaders who are acknowledged for diversity practices, who have encouraged many other women leaders to blossom in their own organization, and bring them in the mix, then this whole demystification of how do I deal with women, men who may not be as open to allowing a female candidate to rise and may have other inhibitions. Maybe talking to other men leaders will also sort out some of the confusions and questions that our young women may have. So I would include them. I would actually go out and consciously look for men leaders who are standout leaders for having brought in diversity and made a success of it in their own organizations. I think I would expand the concentric circle with these 2 engagements in the absolute near term. Yeah. But you're doing a lot. I mean, you are forcing me to say something to you. I'm not coming from, oh, these are missing, but since now you're constantly looking at what next, this is how I would look at it, as what next. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Renuka. Very well noted. And we'll start working on this. It will take us time as we first, put together and operationalize the stuff that we're already working on. But we have noted this, and we will be back with an action plan.
Sorry, I had one more thought, Nupur, if you permit me.
Yes.
Now that we have many senior women as well, they may not in terms of numbers and percentages be at 50%, but many leaders, like you had panel with Shweta, Bala, I have Nitya working in my organization in a very senior capacity as an investing professional, and there are other firms, and I am also very proud to share that my head of legal, my head of compliance are both women, in multiple. So if we bring the industry beneficiaries, that is portfolio companies, to talk about how do they see women from private equity institutions, thereby giving another fuel to this whole thing, where they are accepting. See, ultimately, who's your customer? Your customer is the company that you invest in. And if your customers are also speaking up for their pleasant and positive and value adding engagement with their PE counterparts who have been women, that may also be a good morale booster. So in your next concentric circle, I would bring some of the portfolio companies and carefully choose them of those who have experienced women leadership.
I think that's a very valuable idea, Renuka. We should definitely showcase that aspect as well. And we are very fortunate to have Nitya as a mentor in the mentorship program that WinPE runs with Russell Reynolds. And she's been a mentor for 2 cohorts. And she is amazing. But you're right, bringing out this perspective and saying, what does your customer, your client, think about the value of having some women in the workforce, some women leading your teams. We'll add that to our action plan. Thank you. Razia, can we request for your guidance next?
I think, WinPE should reach out to its members and to their target companies and try and ensure that the KRAs for middle managers is retention of women. And once you link retention to KRAs, everybody takes it very seriously. They stop just faffing around. So there's a scorecard. You say, the preferred goal is X%. And you are supposed to find good women, keep good women, train good women, and tell us why they left. And what exactly is the effort that you made? Did you bring in HR? Did you go to your boss? Did you find peers who could talk to her? Did you reach out to some role models in the firm that you could introduce her to? What did you do? What did you listen? What did you learn? So even if you didn't succeed, what is the effort you made? And what is the conversation you had? Once you link that at middle management, that's the way then you allow the conversations to be forced. Some will be awkward, some will be stilted, some will be diverted, but it will grow. You will encourage the male woman, the female to come into the room, because the male has to justify why he didn't call her into the room, right? Then they can't talk about the sunset. So they will have conversations. And slowly, the male, normally male, will get more comfortable. The message will spread that these conversations are actually happening. If there are changes as a result of these conversations, then outcomes are happening and it percolates very quickly into the system. And if you're judged at the end of the year by this scorecard, and you can, justify why you didn't meet the scorecard. And the goal setting is important, so it's not over ambitious and it's not stressful that people then think that, we are some tokenization policy. Then it'll happen. You have to link it with, results, and imperative to show that if you didn't achieve those results, there is a sequitur of that. I think if we can encourage our PEs to push this down target companies, even if we achieve 10 to 12% success, it will be very good.
Nupur, you're on
Sorry, I
mute.
was on mute again. That- No, thank you, Zia. I think this would be a very powerful way of pushing the gender diversity conversation forward and scaling the effort that we have, right? And especially if we can, get a buy-in to push this forward into the PVC-backed companies, the portfolio companies, then this could be a really large-scale impact that we could end up creating. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. And we've taken the notes and we will get down to drawing out our plans on each of these. And we will come back to you, our advisory board, for your blessings, your guidance, your advice. And once again, today, we're extremely grateful that you took out your time and you spoke to not only the WinPE team, but also everybody that is listening to this conversation and shared all your wisdom and guidance. And I know Rochelle, is waiting to get back into the stream. So I'm going to bring her in, and I think she would like to.
Yeah.
No, because I'm sure she would like a few minutes with you.
Yeah. No. I'll stay on. I just wanted to compliment you on all your work. And the other very good thing, the way it has been conceptualized and implemented, is all participants are highly willing and highly engaged participants. Nobody is feeling little pressurized or compelled to put out some statistics, but really engaging as to how do I make this happen, and that's a great achievement.
Yes, we've been very fortunate to have very strong support from each one of our members. So thank you once again, everyone. Rochelle?
Thank you, everyone. Lots of powerful words and ideas which have been discussed. Something I think I will urge all the women who are listening to the platform to take away, and I'm also taking away, is double down on conviction. And self-party is no fun party, right? Self-pity is no fun party. So just, double down on conviction. I think that's a very, very powerful advice to everyone. Again, Anita, Zia, Renuka, you've been role models that everyone can, be inspired by, and hopefully we will get there one day. Thank you.
There already. You are there already. We will all hold hands and go. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been good fun. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
So Nupur, I think we have another exciting testimonial video. Do we have time for that?
I would love to play it, right? I know we are a little overscheduled, but why not?
Yes.
WinPE has an all-rounded approach for helping women across the ranks become a better version of themselves, pushing for the cause of inclusion collectively. The idea of drawing support by standing together for this cause is being championed by WinPE.
Why does WinPE resonate with me? Their mission of promoting gender diversity in the investing ecosystem through a holistic approach connects with me because I believe that creating a gender diverse workplace is not just the right thing to do, but it's also the smart thing to do.
Almost 2 months with the WinPE Shine initiative. It's a very fulfilling experience because I get to interact with amazing women. It's very aspiring for me and also contribute in a way, empowering women and bringing more diversity in investing, because there is empirical evidence that shows that diversity in making investment decisions can lead to much better returns.
WinPE is a platform that connects strong and independent women who are looking to effect change and promote gender diversity in the PEVC ecosystem.
WinPE as a platform is encapsulating the entire investing ecosystem. Every day they are building a community where women who aspire to join the PE industry, seasoned professionals, entrepreneurs, budding and experienced, all at the same time are getting connected.
Like WinPE start going to colleges and start working their magic, it will definitely change over time. But it is going to take time. It's not going to happen in a hurry, because you're going way back into the chain from a supply perspective.
Look at WinPE. Look at the kind of leadership we're seeing across the globe, and this is indicative of the kind of change that will make a difference in the numbers eventually. But we can't say nothing's changing, because things are changing.
WinPE platform, right? I mean, in our early careers, we didn't have a forum like this where I could interact with such wonderful women peers, brainstorm with them, talk to them about my challenges, my personal journey. We had to chart things out on our own. But now with forums like WinPE, and thanks to Nupur for creating something like this, there is a go-to forum.
Do we have another video to go through?
Actually, it's a video that thanks all the WinPE members for their confidence and support in WinPE, and I think we have to acknowledge their support, because without them we wouldn't be here in this journey.
And it marks the celebration of 2 years, so I think it's just about apt.
Yes.
It's very encouraging to see, Nupur, how the fraternity has grown. When you just started this as an idea, to now having probably the who's who of the investing ecosystem signed up to this agenda and holding the baton, I guess we will have much more to talk about next year, and hopefully those numbers change. But again, I must congratulate you, Nupur, and thank you for creating, as Anita mentioned, a social network for women, which is so powerful. So thank you very much, and thank you, WinPE. And I'll also take this moment once again to thank PwC for helping us and assisting us to set up this event, and to all the partners who've been a part of the 3 wonderful sessions that we had to celebrate the 2 years. And a special thanks to the audience who've listened to us very carefully. We are just here. You can reach us on LinkedIn, on WhatsApp, and if anyone's missed the video, the videos are available as well. But thank you very much, and a pleasant evening to everyone.
And a big thank you to you, Rochelle. You've been a champion and a friend from day one, and we look forward to doing this with you every year. So thank you very much for all your love. And a big shout out to all of WinPE's friends. We've completed 2 years, and we're moving on to more.
Yes. Good evening, everyone.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you.